The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agree to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones Season 8 predictions video. As I'm sure most of you know by now, there have been many different events throughout the course of Game of Thrones that has had a big impact on not only the characters within the show, but also us as an audience. Now, I should say this video might seem like a breakdown of the first episode, but I don't want to go over every single possible scene. In today's video, I want to go over some of the big events that we could see. As of right now, I can't predict every single scene that will happen next season, but if you keep in mind how Season 7 ended, along with the direction the show has been heading in, I think we can take a good guess at what some of the big events will be in the final season of Game of Thrones. Now, I do want to clarify one thing before we go any further. When I'm referring to a big event, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to involve any action sequences, at least not in my opinion. There have been a number of different events that did not involve any action that had a big impact on the story and the characters. Just to give you a few examples, when Bran Stark was pushed out of the tower window, when King Joffrey was poisoned at his own wedding, and when Jon Snow was resurrected by Melisandre. I would not consider those to be action scenes, but each of them did have a very big impact on the television show and even us as an audience. So, with that in mind, let's move on to my predictions for the final season. You might have heard me talk about some of these things in various videos before, but this is my first time putting all of them together in the same video. Let's start off with the very first episode of the 8th season. We have heard from a number of different sources that the opening scene of the final season will take place in and around Winterfell, the home of House Stark. This will most likely involve the arrival of Jon Snow, Daenerys Targaryen, and their respective parties. This is interesting because the very first scene has a lot of potential to be a big event for many different reasons. First, let's get the reunions out of the way, because my god, there will be a lot of them in the opening episode. This scene was already teased a few months ago when HBO released a very short clip of Jon Snow and Sansa Stark reuniting in Winterfell together. Now, I would consider this to be a big event because not only will this be a very powerful scene on an emotional level, but most of the reunions will lead to some of these characters doing some great things together in the future. We have already seen Jon Snow reunite with Sansa at Castle Black. But what makes the scene so special is the fact that Jon Snow will be reuniting with Arya Stark and Bran Stark, two characters he hasn't seen since the first season of the show. I'm already expecting the reunion between Jon and Arya to be very emotional, but when Jon reunites with Bran, this will completely change everything. Not only does Bran Stark have a major secret to tell Jon Snow, but these two characters working together will most likely lead to the downfall of Westeros' biggest threat, which is the Night King. As I've said in some of my previous videos before, Jon Snow and Bran Stark have the closest connection to the Night King. I think it's safe to say that even the Night King might look at Jon and Bran as potentially his biggest threat as well. We have seen glimpses of this in previous seasons. The Night King not only entered Bran Stark's vision, but he was also able to reach out and grab him by the arm. And of course, we cannot forget the two epic stare-downs between Jon Snow and the Night King. The first time it happened was at Hardhome, then we saw it happen again when Jon went beyond the wall to capture a White. This is obviously leading to a final confrontation between the members of House Stark, which, if you've seen some of my other videos, then you would know that I think the Night King is also a member from House Stark. We know that Jon Snow wants to stop the Night King, and Bran Stark wants to stop the Night King as well. So, when Jon Snow and Bran reunite, they will begin to devise their plan of stopping him for good. We know that Bran can go inside of the werewood net to hopefully find out more information about the Night King, like where he wants to go, what he ultimately wants, and hopefully how to stop him. Once Bran finds out all the information, he can tell Jon what to do. Then Jon can apply that knowledge on the battlefield. So, even though I'm dying to see the reunion between Arya Stark and Jon Snow, I believe one of the reunions that will have the biggest impact on the story is when Jon and Bran finally reunite next season. Also, like I said a minute ago, Bran still has a very big secret to reveal to Jon as well. This also has the potential to completely change everything, because we don't know how everyone will react to that news. There is a very good chance that this could piss a lot of people off for obvious reasons. One reason is because for years Daenerys has believed that she is the rightful queen of the Seven Kingdoms. Ever since her brother died in the first season, Daenerys has said that she was next in line to take the Iron Throne, but now we know that is not true. Thanks to Samwell Tarly, Gilly, and Bran Stark, we know that Jon is the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. Since Rhaegar and Lyanna were married, that makes Jon Snow a legitimized Targaryen, and next in line for the Iron Throne. That revelation could make Daenerys very angry. Now there is always a chance that Jon could step aside for Daenerys, but until that happens, we don't know how that's going to play out. Not to mention, we also have to consider how all of Jon's bannermen react to that news. We already know there is no love for the Targaryens of the North. In fact, some of Jon's biggest supporters already voiced that opinion before he left to go greet with Daenerys. They told Jon that a Targaryen cannot be trusted. So, what are they going to do when they find out that Jon is the child of Rhaegar Targaryen? Will they abandon his cause and flee back to their homelands? Or could one of them even try to kill Jon? Now I know that would be a drastic decision, but it would not be the first time Jon was stabbed by one of his own men. These are just some of the reasons why Bran Stark has to be very careful with the way that he reveals that information. He might want to pull Jon aside and tell him that in private. That way Jon can break the news after, when and if they defeat the Night King. He doesn't want to risk losing all of his allies before the main event begins. Now I'm pretty sure I've said this before, but I don't think Jon's parentage gets revealed in the first episode. I don't know if Bran will tell Jon right away. And we also know how this story treats its fans. We never get everything all at once. I believe their first conversation could be about Bran Stark being the new three-eyed raven, and some of the things that he has seen that involve the Night King. This is obviously the most pressing issue at the moment, especially when you consider that Jon doesn't even know the Night King has knocked down the wall yet. In my opinion, that should be the very first thing that Bran says to Jon. That way they can start to prepare the castle and their soldiers for battle. They need to start making weapons ASAP, and the castle needs to be fitted for some defensive weapons as well. Let's move on though, because I have a lot of other things to cover. So I talked about Jon finally reuniting with Arya and Bran, but Jon will have another reunion that should have a very big impact on the story, which is when Jon reunites with Samwell Tarly. These two characters haven't seen each other since Season 5, and in fact, Sam just happened to have left right before Jon was murdered. Hopefully we get to see them discuss that for at least a few moments, because I would like to know what Sam thinks about Jon getting resurrected. But the reason why I think the reunion has a lot of potential is because of some of the things that Samwell Tarly currently possesses. As we all know, Samwell has his family's ancestral Valyrian steel sword, Heartsbane, but Sam also has all those old-ass books and documents he took from the Citadel. We don't know exactly what's inside of them yet, but they are obviously very significant, otherwise they would have never shown Sam taking those things out of the Citadel. We do know that Sam was trying to find some of the answers to stopping the White Walkers, but we also know one of those books contained what looked like to be the phases or cycles of the moon. This could lead us to finding out why the seasons are so unpredictable in Westeros. George R.R. Martin did say that we would eventually find out why the winters last so long, and by the looks of it, the television show might reveal that information as well. It most likely relates to the White Walkers in some way, and when or if they are defeated, I imagine the seasons will go back to normal, but that's just a guess. Anyway, Samwell Tarly will also play a very big role in defeating the Night King. He might not be the one to swing the sword, but as I've said before, he will assist Bran in determining where to look inside of the weirwood net to find the answers. We have already seen these two characters working together in the Season 7 finale, and we will continue to see them work together throughout the remainder of the show. Samwell Tarly should be able to find some of the info in those books, then he can tell Bran where to look inside of the weirwood net, then Bran can tell Jon what to do on the battlefield. These three characters will complement each other's abilities next season. With their powers combined, they are Captain Planet. Now let's move on to some of the other characters in Jon's party, because there are a few other reunions that could lead on to something big in the upcoming episodes. Let's start off with Gendry. As we all know, Gendry's main job is to make weapons for the upcoming battle against the Night King. When Davos went and found Gendry, he told Gendry they needed him in Winterfell to work in the forges, which Gendry did agree to do. When Davos took Gendry to meet Jon, he was supposed to keep his mouth shut and just go straight to Winterfell to get started right away, but Gendry could not resist telling Jon who he was, which did lead Gendry to go and be on the wall with Jon. Thankfully, Gendry was able to survive that mission, and now he should be on his way to Winterfell as well. Now this is where I want to throw you a little curveball, because everyone knows who Gendry should reunite with next season, but I want to discuss another possibility first. In the books, Gendry has a very interesting encounter with Brienne of Tarth. Now they might not do any of this in the show, but I want to briefly touch on it just in case that they do. When Gendry and Brienne meet in the books, Brienne can't help but think how much Gendry looks like Renly, which we all know Brienne loved Renly. We could get a scene where Brienne talks to Gendry about this, or at the very least, Brienne could see Gendry from across the courtyard, and she might do a double take, noticing how familiar he looks. But that's not the main reason why I wanted to talk about this. Some of you might not actually know this if you haven't read the books, but Gendry saves Brienne's life. I did read the chapter in one of my videos, but some of you might not have seen that video. In the books, Brienne gets into a vicious fight with a character known as Biter. He was one of the men that was locked up with Jack and Agar. Well, during their fight, Brienne gets her ass kicked pretty damn bad. Biter ends up breaking some of her bones, he gives her a serious concussion, and he also bites off a big piece of her cheek. During the fight, as Brienne is starting to lose consciousness, Biter climbs on top of her, and he is moments away from killing her, but Gendry comes up from behind him, and he shoves a spear through the back of his head. The spear that Gendry uses actually goes right through his skull, and it pokes out through his mouth. It makes it almost look like he has a big red tongue with a very sharp edge to it. It actually looks very similar to what Jon Snow did to Carl Tanner. Now obviously, we will not see Brienne and Biter fight next season. However, I can't help but wonder if the show will try to include a scene where Gendry does save Brienne at some point. Like perhaps during the battle against the Army of the Dead. I think that would be a nice little nod to the books, and it would also give Gendry something else to do besides just making weapons. But anyway, sorry to go off on that little tangent, but I just wanted to throw that out there. Like I said, another highly anticipated reunion is that of Arya Stark and Gendry. Fans have been waiting for this ever since they parted ways in the 3rd season, but we've had to wait until the final season for it to finally happen. Obviously, this would be a very emotional reunion, but the main reason why I want to talk about this is because it could be setting up something for later. If you've been a subscriber of my channel since day one, then you would know that I have been an Arya and Gendry supporter for many years. Now, just because they reunite doesn't mean that they will settle down together at the end. But there is always that chance that this could plant a seed that could grow into something much larger in the later episodes. Perhaps Gendry is a part of Arya's endgame, or maybe even Sansa's. Either way, this would fit into Robert Baratheon's wishes of finally uniting houses Baratheon and Stark, through the union of Robert's son and one of Ned Stark's daughters, but only time will tell. Now let's move on to our old friend Sandor Clegane, who also happens to be traveling with Jon Snow and Daenerys. Sandor's arrival at Winterfell has some significance because of his obvious connection to both of the Stark daughters, Arya and Sansa. Some people believe in the Sand theory, which states that Sansa and Sandor will become romantically involved at the end of the show, while others believe that Arya and Sandor could go traveling west of Westeros together after everything is all said and done. Either scenario has potential to be interesting, although neither of them could happen, but hey, who knows? If you've seen one of my recent videos, I think there is also a chance that the Hound could stay on as a member of Sansa's Queensguard, assuming that both of those characters live. Whatever the case may be, it will stem from this initial reunion at the beginning of the 8th season. It's kinda crazy how one scene can impact so many different characters, especially when there is so many in the same place at the same time. Now I suppose I should also mention Tyrion as well, because his reunion with Sansa could be interesting to say the least. As we all know, these two characters were once man and wife, but that ended the day that Joffrey was murdered at his own wedding. Now that so much has happened to both of these characters since then, it should be interesting to see how they treat each other at this stage in their lives. I imagine that Sansa will be a little more acceptive of Tyrion, now knowing that he truly was kinder than any of his other relatives. Not to mention, we did hear Sansa express that when Jon received his letter asking him to come and greet with Daenerys. Sansa said Tyrion is nothing like the other Lannisters, so I am curious to see how their relationship plays out in the upcoming episodes. I'm also looking forward to the reunion between Tyrion and Bran Stark. As we all know, Tyrion has a soft spot for cripples, bastards, and broken things, which did lead to Tyrion giving Bran the blueprints for having a saddle made custom just for him. This could lead to a nice reunion with Bran and Tyrion. It could even potentially lead to them working together in some capacity. We all know that Tyrion likes to read, and he's already very well versed in most of Westeros' history, which could come in handy when it's time for Bran to go back inside of the weirwood net. Not to mention, Samwell Tarly also has all those books and documents. Tyrion could always help Sam look through all that stuff to try to make sense of it all. This would also give Tyrion another job instead of just standing around and cracking jokes. Tyrion Lannister needs something to do that has some sort of significance to it. He is a smart man, so let's put that to good use. Tyrion is also very clever, and that could help when it comes time to planning the attack or defensive strategy against the Night King. Now let's move on to the second reason why the opening scene could get very interesting. I talked about some of the biggest reunions, but now I want to talk about one other factor that could have a very big impact on the final season. As we all know, Jon is arriving at Winterfell with Daenerys Targaryen, the very person who almost everyone in the North was against Jon going to greet with in the first place. If it wasn't bad enough that Jon went against everyone's wishes to go and make an alliance with her, but now Jon is bringing her right into their backyard. But Daenerys isn't coming alone. Oh no no no. She's also coming with 2 very big ass dragons and a big ass Dothraki army, who everyone pretty much sees as savages. I'm not even sure how they're going to feed everyone, let alone have everyone get along with one another is a completely different story. I think it's safe to say that Jon could catch some flack for this. Not just from the other Northern Lords, but from Sansa as well. Sansa, including the Northern Lords, see the Targaryens as their enemies. After all, it was a Targaryen that murdered Sansa's grandfather and uncle, and it was also a Targaryen who Sansa believes kidnapped and raped her Aunt Lyanna. Now all of this should get settled when Bran eventually reveals the truth, but when Daenerys first arrives, things could get extremely tense to say the least. According to much speculation, this was already teased in that very short clip when we see Jon and Sansa reunite. When HBO uploaded that clip, everyone immediately assumed that Sansa was staring at Daenerys Targaryen, which is very possible. But she could also be looking at Tyrion, the Hound, the Dothraki, or even the damn dragons. We don't know who or what she's looking at, but I could definitely see Sansa having problems with Jon arriving with company. Sansa already knows that Jon bent the knee, which essentially gave up his power as king in the North, but wait until everyone finds out that Jon and Daenerys have been sleeping together. Shit's about to pop off. They could damn near dedicate the entire first episode to the opening scene. Everything I have mentioned in the video so far all stems from that scene. So many reunions, so many conversations of importance, with so much at stake. This should make for one hell of an opener. Now let's get out of Winterfell and head down to King's Landing. When it comes to Cersei Lannister, there isn't a whole lot going on right now. As far as we know, she's patiently waiting for Euron Greyjoy to arrive with the Golden Company, and she's hoping that the Army of the Dead can defeat her enemies in the North. But this can't be all that Cersei does at the start of the season. Now since they are speeding up the show, I suppose they could have Euron arrive with the Golden Company almost immediately, but I'm not sure if they're going to do it like that since Euron did have to go all the way to Essos and back. For Cersei's very first scene, I think one of 2 things could happen. According to Cersei Lannister, she is pregnant with her brother Jaime's child. Assuming that's true, and she is pregnant, I believe she will have a miscarriage next season. I actually believe that the miscarriage will ultimately lead to Cersei attempting to blow up King's Landing, but I will go more into that when I cover the later episodes. Cersei's very first scene could be with her waking up in a bed covered in blood. Not only would that continue Cersei down the path of making her go completely mad queen, but that would also open up the lane for Euron Greyjoy. With Jaime Lannister no longer around, and Cersei no longer pregnant, that could allow for Cersei and Euron's relationship to, let's say, blossom. Cersei could potentially want to try to get pregnant again, then Euron could finally present his big, kraken tentacle. Now, if Cersei's first scene doesn't involve a miscarriage, there is one other thing we might see her do. Like I said earlier, I just can't picture Cersei sitting around and waiting for everything to fall into her lap. She would be incredibly stupid to just completely rely on the Night King defeating Jon and Daenerys, or the Golden Company being enough to defend King's Landing. That will not be enough. Cersei should know this, and Qyburn should know this. With that being said, both of them know what they could use to help them defend the Iron Throne. That is wildfire and ballistas. 2 weapons that Cersei has added to her arsenal before. I've had this feeling that we will get a scene of them both having those weapons mass-produced. Cersei does have good credit with the Iron Bank again, so there's no reason why she should not be able to get that done, but that's just my opinion. This could have a very big impact on the show because not only could they potentially kill another one of Dany's dragons, but Cersei could also blow up King's Landing. That would definitely make things a lot more exciting in King's Landing. Alright, but let's move on to Theon Greyjoy because almost all of us are expecting a big showdown with his uncle, Euron Greyjoy. Now, I highly doubt this would happen in the very first episode. As I've said, Euron is picking up the Golden Company, which according to Cersei, they have 20,000 mercenaries along with elephants trained in battle. So, when you combine that with Euron's men, along with his ships, there is no way in hell that Theon can challenge his uncle in the first episode when he's surrounded by that many men. Theon's crew is way too small to even attempt something like that, and if they did, it would be so unrealistic it could ruin the entire build-up to Theon completing that redemption arc. If anything, we may see Theon arrive at the Iron Islands, maybe in hopes of finding his sister locked up in a dungeon there, or he could try to salvage any men that may have stayed back when everyone left. Theon and Euron will have a fight to the death, but I don't think that happens until a later episode. Now let me briefly talk about Jaime's potential scene, then we can move on to the grand finale of the first episode. I'm not 100% sure that Jaime will arrive in Winterfell in the first episode. Now he absolutely could, but that all depends on where he stops first. Jaime might try to stop at Riverrun to gather up as many men as possible, and he could also stop at the Twins. If you paid attention to any of the casting news for Season 8, then you would know that they did cast 2 new actors to stand in as members of House Frey. Based on that information, we will see House Frey at least one more time. Jaime could also have made plans to meet with Bronn somewhere along the road, even maybe at the Crossroads Inn, who knows. But if Jaime makes a bunch of stops, then he probably won't arrive in Winterfell until the very end of the first episode, or the beginning of the second episode. If Jaime Lannister does arrive in the first episode, I think it would be near the very end. I think the scene could kinda play out like this. Do you remember when Arya arrived back in Winterfell last season? Well, during that scene, we got a wide shot of Arya overlooking Winterfell from the hilltop. Then after a few seconds, we got a close-up of Arya's face as she is full of emotion from seeing her home for the first time in so many years. We could get a similar scene with Jaime arriving as well. Near the very end of the episode, we could get the exact same shot of someone sitting on their horse overlooking Winterfell from a distance. Then as the camera changes sides for the close-up, we could see that it's Jaime Lannister, and he's not alone. Jaime is with Bronn and an entire army marching behind him. The close-up could just focus on Jaime's face for a few seconds as he contemplates what he's about to say when he reaches the gates. That scene could end right here before Jaime ever reaches the gate. That would be a very nice teaser for the second episode. But there is one final scene. Oh shit, you know what? I just thought of this. Okay, picture this. As Jaime is overlooking Winterfell, and we get the reveal that he has an army marching behind him, before the scene ends, they could do this. Like I said, as Jaime is overlooking Winterfell, contemplating what he's gonna say, at the same time we could see dozens or even hundreds of birds fly out from Winterfell's Godswood. Now that would obviously be Bran sending the birds out for some reason. But as Jaime's overlooking Winterfell, we could see Jaime look up at the big ass flock of birds, wondering where the hell they're going. As Jaime looks up, the camera could leave Jaime as a tease for the next episode, but then the camera could start to follow the birds. Just like when Bran sent the birds out beyond the wall. We saw them leave Winterfell, then we followed them all the way up north. But this time, as we are following the birds, we can notice that they aren't traveling that far north this time. In fact, they are traveling to one of the next closest castles, like the Last Hearth or the Carhold. As the birds are getting closer to the castle, we could hear a dragon scream so loud that it causes all of the birds to scatter. Then, we get our grand finale in the first episode. The Night King has arrived at his first target. Chaos erupts. Blue flames start scorching the castle and everyone inside. We don't even really have to see a bunch of people die. All we need to hear are the screams coming from inside of the castle as the blue flame engulfs the entire area. That's when Bran snaps back out of the birds, but this time Bran is covered in sweat, even though he's sitting out in the snow by the weirwood tree. After Bran snaps out of it, we can see him look over to Jon, with a terrified look on his face. Then, the episode cuts off and the credits roll. That would be dope. But let me know what you think. Keep in mind, these are just some of the big events that I think we could see in the first episode of the final season. If you would like me to continue and do the next episode, just leave a comment telling me to do the next episode. That way I know you want me to, and I will know that you listened until the very end. Anyways, I want to thank everyone for watching the video, and I also want to thank all of my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate all the support you've shown me over the past year. It truly means a lot to me. Have a great day, everyone, and a Happy New Year's. I'll see you soon. Bye.